Welcome, everyone, to Together, a higher ed podcast where we bring you stories, insights, and experiences from across the higher education sector, fostering community and collaboration to drive transformative change. Our viewers may have noticed that today things are a little different on set. We're recording our podcast live at the 6th Annual Transfer Student Success Summit hosted here at the University of Utah with our partners from Salt Lake Community College. We are grateful for certainly viewers and listeners, but we're also really grateful for everybody in the ballroom today. This morning, I have two very distinguished guests on stage and on podcast. Welcome Salt Lake Community College President Dr. Greg Peterson and the University of Utah's President Dr. Taylor Randall. Thank you both for being here. Yeah. So as listeners, viewers, and folks in the audience know, and certainly the two presidents, there's a long-standing partnership between the University of Utah and Salt Lake Community College. We have built a foundation, we heard in the opening, between the two institutions. We know there's also room for improvement. In other words, we have a lot of success to celebrate, and we have more work to do to support student success among our transfer students. So to get us rolling, question one. As part of that long-standing partnership, when it comes especially to the transfer process, what do either of you see, both of you see, as the strengths and the benefits of our two institutions working together?
I'm going to let Greg start, but I'm just going to say the strength is the fashion of the shoes of the both presidents. Just to get things going.
Shoe game.
Yeah.
Strong.
I got up this morning knowing I had a challenge ahead of me because he's got great shoes. Yeah.
If you get nothing out of this, the shoe game.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the bar we'd set.
Sorry. On a serious note, go ahead, Greg.
So, I think coming from out of state, and so that we don't take for granted this relationship, most successful transfer agreements exist between community colleges and regional universities. There's not a lot of strong partnerships with R1 institutions. And in a state like Utah, where you could claim the University of Utah is the University of Utah, right? There could be a lack of incentive to even have these conversations. So I just want to say, coming in, I am really excited and impressed by the commitment of this system approach, of understanding that we are better together in the work that we do.
You know, one of the things I've been really impressed about this relationship, and my history goes back to 12 years as dean of the business school, is simply the quality of education that both institutions provide. I noticed, particularly as I was dean, I would go meet with successful alumni around the world, and in particular, when I went to New York City to visit Wall Street, I would ask each of those students what their story was, and I would say 50 to 60% had been transfer students from Salt Lake Community College. And as you talked, you began to realize that what Salt Lake Community College had brought to the table is an inspiration to even get involved in higher ed. Many of these individuals were from somewhat non-traditional backgrounds, and there had been a spark lit at Salt Lake Community College, which had continued into the University of Utah. And to me, that was just remarkable. And then, of course, if you just backed into all the things that had to happen for those individuals to be successful, well, Salt Lake Community College provided that spark. It provided financial aid. It provided the ability to get off and feel successful in higher education, so that a move to an institution like the University of Utah was really quite seamless. And then they could tell stories of dozens of individuals along the way that had reached out and helped them, whether it was with parking passes or just making sure that they had the right classes taken. It was really, to me, it's those stories that embody the strengths of our relationship.
I appreciate that. I mean, both of you touched on elements of kind of what makes the partnership so unique. I'm wondering if there are any other or additional thoughts about, but between the two of you, no doubt, you're texting each other, calling each other, emailing each other, maybe not so much on the email, who knows? You see each other at events constantly. Other elements that make this partnership between, again, an R1 and a community college unique, special. I mean, I think we got folks in the audience, listeners, viewers, who will know if they've ever experienced the magic between the two of us, between the two institutions. President Randall, you speak to the alums from both institutions when you run into them anywhere in the country. Could either of you speak to more of those unique kind of qualities between us in the partnership?
I'm happy to take it. At least while I have been president, I've been able to interact with two presidents of Salt Lake Community College, and both, I think, both have had the ability to share with us the vision of what Salt Lake Community College is, which allows us to also describe kind of our role. And what's been unique about that partnership with those presidents is an acknowledgement of what we do best and what they do best. And if anything were to happen today, I would love for you all to think of and talk about the things that we talk about, because I think it leads to some operational and tactical issues that need to be implemented. Salt Lake Community College is really good at reaching in to the community in Salt Lake, right? Some of the programs that have been long-standing to bring individuals into the system of higher education are just simply remarkable. And we think that the University of Utah needs to lean in to those programs, right? Support it the best way we can. Don't duplicate them, right? Be honest in terms of the types and profiles of students that are probably likely to be more successful via Salt Lake Community College instead of starting at the University of Utah. Likewise, when we have collaborations from individuals at Salt Lake Community College that know what we do and how a student can be successful at our university, our success gets driven by bringing those students here. And so I've always felt it was important that each of us describe what we're good at and what we can do for each other, and I think we have to get that to permeate down throughout every individual in both of our organizations.
Yeah, I really want to build on that. When we think about Salt Lake Community College has a distinct role, and it complements the university. It doesn't compete. So even when we think about concurrent enrollment, I like to think of that as early transfer, because we really are preparing students who are ready to get that leg up to go right to the university. We want them to go. If they're ready, go to the university, be there. So thinking about those models, one thing I think is unique that is how we've begun to think about sharing resources. And so the Harriman campus is a great example of that. Is how do we co-locate, how do we share, how do we integrate in ways that support that student experience differently. It's one thing to do a good handoff, it's another to make that seamless.
Yeah. So both of you, thank you both. You've both touched on, I think in answers there, the roles and the distinct roles and the partnership roles between SLCC and the U in advancing post-secondary access, right? Into community, saying this, either the institutions and at some point perhaps both of the institutions are your college and university, right? They're your institution. Could you share, either of you from your perspectives, a little more about that role in advancing post-secondary access and student success in Utah and the Salt Lake Valley in particular?
So I would say sometimes we think about distinct student groups, that somehow there are university-bound students and there are non-university-bound students. And what I've learned in the community college space is that there are students who just don't know yet the potential of their pathway. And we have so many students, and if you talk to our transfer students, you talk to the majority of them, they never realized they would be a U student and they would thrive here. It was that opportunity that we sparked that made it possible. So for me, when we talk about access, we're really talking about making the experiences, the quality of education, these life-changing moments that can happen at the university available more broadly to our community, and in ways to individuals, to audiences who don't realize that could be them.
I want to throw a little bit of a curveball into this whole thing.
Sure.
Not actually a negative one, but just a different way to look at the University of Utah. So one of the unique things about the University of Utah is we are also a healthcare system. I don't know, I think our healthcare system would claim they're $6.2 billion of a healthcare system with, tens of thousands of employees. We've been asking ourselves, how should a healthcare system actually interact with an educational system to bring workforce to bear. And what we find out, particularly at entry-level jobs, is that these are individuals that often haven't thought about going to college. They also have a real fundamental, I would say, need, and that is they need to work first and earn a living first before they think about attending a four-year college. And many of the certificates and entry-level qualifications they need are things that we do not offer at the University of Utah. And so recently we've been thinking about how would we reconfigure our human resources at our hospital if you were to think of us as, right, one of the, largest employers in the state, and how would we then partner with an institution like Salt Lake Community College to solve the workforce needs of a hospital system rather than to solve a set of educational goals of an educational system. When you start thinking about things that way, the services you offer to students, the way you talk about educational pathways changes immediately. And we have begun, as President Peterson knows, to start placing people in our healthcare system that come directly from, whether it be CNA programs in high schools or MA programs or lab tech programs or farm tech programs. And those are not programs that we actually offer. And so we've increasingly been able to figure out how does the University of Utah actually interface with Salt Lake Community College and their programs as an employer, particularly in our healthcare system, rather than an educational system that may be trying to figure out where students are supposed to go. And I actually think that's not a small opportunity. I think there are thousands upon thousands of students that actually could enter higher education via that pathway, which is very collaborative between the two institutions rather than necessarily a very traditional, hey, you just graduated, it's time to come to college.
I was at a high school scholarship event this week where students were pitching their career pathways. And so to this point, and we had half of the students were interested in healthcare and first generation, and all of them had these paths that said, I'm going to come into tech level as my first step and then continue on because I want to be a doctor, I want to be a dentist. But they saw steps along the way that really show that spectrum.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of you in the room have already articulated, pathways from CNA to MD, right? And that's really an amazing thing. And what's also interesting about that, if that sounds pie in the sky, I think we have 2 or 3 physicians at our university that actually walked that path and worked their way through that. And so when you've got mentors and a pathway, I think some really special things can happen.
So if I can follow up, I think what I hear you both describing is and tell me if I've got this wrong, please, or right, or close to right, the notion of kind of stacking the kind of opportunities for access, right? So it's not one path for access, but there might be multiple paths, and working together, creating cleaner kind of glide ways to get to those pathways for access. It speaks, if I can, and transition as it speaks to the raging, my word, not yours, but the raging debate, the public debate and the policy debate happening in the country, in the United States right now, about value of higher education, and specifically, not just even public, but just higher education writ large. We've got you both here today. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to speak to or articulate from your perspectives, independent and then in partnership, that value of higher education, and especially public higher education, both in Utah and in the United States today.
So I'll take a stab at so the first thing that's helpful for me, it's interesting, when you ask in general our society if higher education is a value, we have less confidence than we have, but we have less confidence in all institutions. So you look across religion, you look across government. I put together a slide for a recent large employee event, and it was funny because I was trying to capture that and the change over time, and I wanted to capture Congress, but they haven't changed over time. They've been 9% for 10 years. So just kind of in perspective, that there's still a lot of confidence in higher ed.
They only have room to grow.
Right, exactly.
Right? There's a great opportunity for them.
But then when you do local surveying of your local institutions, there is greater trust in local institutions. And so what that speaks to me is that our work in really reinforcing the value of higher education is local. It is the relationships we have with our community. It's the pathways that we create. That's what really matters in this debate, is can our community see themselves and see what we provide as the tools they need to succeed.
Yeah, in their lives, right? Yeah. And the lives of their kids and perhaps their grandkids. President?
You know, to be honest, as I look at statistics on the power of higher education, I don't think I've ever seen a more statistically overwhelming argument. In fact, I sit down and I'm like, why are we even having this debate? Higher income, higher happiness, more involvement in the community, more active, good or bad politically. All of those things, right, occur if you complete some or all of a degree. So, and then on top of that, if you just look at the numbers in this state, and I'll speak some to the University of Utah, because I know that Salt Lake Community College does a great job of keeping tuition relatively low, but the average in-state student at the University of Utah only pays about 40% of our list price, which is really an amazing thing given all the aid, whether it be Pell Grants or scholarships that are coming in. That translates into some of the lowest student debt rates. Last time I checked, it was well below $20,000, and only 40-ish% of those students actually take out that number. So we're a really good bargain. And then at the University of Utah, what we try to do is we've made some big investments in student placement services and career services. And our goal is to make sure that every student leaves here making at least the median income of the state of Utah, and we're starting to make big progress on that. So you combine all of that, the ROI is very obvious. It doesn't take a lot of math to figure that out. But for sure, there are pockets of individuals in there that are not meeting those averages. And so what we try to spend a lot of time on are the groups that tend, to be out of line with the averages I just gave. And there are significant pockets. And I think my conclusion to where we're seeing that dissatisfaction, at least in the state of Utah, is typically an individual that's probably just above Pell range, right, is having to work really, really hard to get through school, may not have the family support that they need, first-generation college students. And so, again, you start thinking about those individuals and you say, that's probably where we've got to really rethink some of our processes and how we make them successful.
I appreciate that, and both of your answers in a couple of different ways. I mean, having worked with and been in conversation with both of you and a lot of the folks in this room, I think if I can follow that, President Randall, it's like building both institutions that can work for those students. We know the institutions will work for the multi-gen affluent student if it's going to work, right, for first-gen low-income students and the like. I think it's a really powerful concept. I appreciate you raising it. Because it's institutional design work, right?
Yeah, it is. And again, I remember early as my career as an administrator, I asked a simple question. I said, give me a list of individuals that were accepted to this institution but did not enroll. And I started making phone calls myself. And, the stories were frankly heartbreaking, right? Things as simple as I could not figure out parking pass. Where is your library? Or where is your library? And you begin to realize, and then you said, well, tell me about yourself. And you begin to realize someone who has never been on a college campus, those things are, those things are daunting.
Yeah, they're real.
Yeah.
And they're just right there, we talk a lot about barriers. I mean, that's an actual barrier to how am I going to get onto the campus? How am I going to find the right classroom? I know people in this room have those conversations every day in, day out. I know you both know it. But I just want to take the opportunity to praise their work, because day in, day out, they're answering those questions of students and families.
Yeah, by the way, yeah, you're great.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me follow it up with an anecdote. I was hopping out of my car yesterday, and I'm usually not accosted as I get out of my car, but this day I wouldn't call it accosted. A student, and it appeared to be a parent, came running up to me. Do you remember I met you 2 years ago? I'm like,
Nice.
Yes, I did. I did. And actually, after talking with them a minute, I did. And they were from New Jersey, not a transfer student. So a lot is just a compliment to our staff. This student's mother said, I have never met an organization that is more kind, more responsive in my entire life. She said, that's not New Jersey. I said, well, it's Utah.
It's Utah.
It's Utah. Yeah. And every time I show up here, I meet you, President. That's just amazing. I said, well, I park right here. Meet me right here every morning at 7:30. We'll be fine. Anyway, but I think that's a compliment, right? I mean, that's a compliment to all of you, and the fact that you'll go the extra mile. And she even described that, yeah, I didn't know where to get somewhere. The person stood up from their desk and walked me a block away and showed me the office. I'm thinking that is truly an amazing dedication to your job. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah. So I'll transition us if I can. Where we find ourselves now, both within the state and just, again, across the country, about value and about values, and around kind of strategic planning. Both institutions find themselves, I think, in strategic planning processes, and at the same time navigating state, federal landscapes, plural, that can impact higher education. I think it was yesterday that we saw the potential closure of the Federal Department of Education. I think a lot of folks in the room, viewers and listeners, are paying close attention to that because it has potential, very real, tangible impact on lives, not just students. I'm wondering, hoping that both of you might respond to where do you see transfer students and the partnership between SLCC and the U fit in that strategic planning, right? The ability to see that partnership come out the other side of the work that's ongoing at present in a better place, affected by those external factors, but also perhaps staying true to who we are and who we want to be.
So I think echoing President Randall's comments earlier, we spend too much time focusing on our institution. So thinking that our job is to help our students understand how to navigate our institutions instead of changing our institutions to meet the needs of our students. Right? And so we build all of these structures. Advising is a great example. Like we have made advising so complicated, you have to have a master's degree in advising to read our catalogs and explain them to students, right? And so then we have to build in even more advisors to navigate the systems we've created. So our work, I think that if we can learn from what's happening locally, what's happening at the federal level, is that our work is to shed some of our tradition, some of our legacy, and understand we can be different and better in our time period. Example of that, I just want to bring us, we're thinking about this. So at Salt Lake Community College, over 70% of our students are part-time, over 70% of our students are working. Those things don't go away when they transfer. But our institutions were not built for part-time working students. So how do we think differently about our institutions? We have over-prioritized choice. And so some of this work, House Bill 265, telling us to reinvest, to focus, some of that is good for us to do because we have said, I love that the story, the example of the jam, right? That they did the study where they had like 12 jams in one aisle of a grocery store and 4 jams in another aisle of the grocery store, and they wanted to see which one sold more jam. And of course, lots of people loved the 12 jam display, but no one bought because they were all overwhelmed by the options. But when they had 4 options, they chose which one they liked, and they were happy, and they moved forward. We have to think in that same way. So how do we give less choice, but give quality choice up front that's really aligned to the student experience that moves them through, instead of overwhelming choices that really may not have the impact we think that they would have.
Yeah. Balancing those options with quality is what I hear you saying. President, add to that, take away.
Oddly, this is what I did my PhD thesis on. So I know the jam thing. I actually did experiments like this. The funny one we did, not so funny, but a colleague of mine did. I actually didn't participate in the study. They took a look at grocery stores, and there are 50,000 plus items to choose from in grocery stores, and they eliminated 2/3 of them. And they found in the stores that they eliminated 2/3 of them, people thought they had more choice. So, it says something. And again, a lot of my academic research was in the consumer products area, but it was about how you presented choices to individuals so that they had higher levels of satisfaction. And, while we thought a lot about that, I'm not at that detailed level of design, but when I was in the business school, we thought a lot about, how you actually presented choices to people. And in some sense, what we found is you had to give them an experience with a choice early on, rather than to have them to take classes. They had to feel the careers that they could be a part of. Let me turn to just another interesting analogy, and this is one I think that as sister institutions we ought to lean into. So, massive time of change in higher education. There's no question. And somebody told me yesterday, they said, Taylor, you ought to try this, I don't know whether it's a metaphor or whatever it is, but you ought to try this out on people. So I'll try this out on you today. Here we go. What does a buffalo do? This is not a joke. What does a buffalo do in a storm? A buffalo, unlike other animals, turns into the storm and runs at it. And so if you run at it, you're going to be in it a shorter amount of time. The second thing they do is they run together. Right? They run in a pack and they run together. And so think about that for a second, right? We're in the middle of a storm. You can either let change happen to you, or you can take advantage of change and be ahead. I think that's the buffalo running into the storm. And it's a lot easier, right, if you're taking turns, taking the first bites out of the wind, right, and you're running together. So I thought it was kind of a nice way to view what we ought to be doing as institutions together.
I like it. I like it a lot, in fact, to the extent that then, so this is the final, I'm going to ask final question. And you've set me up perfectly. Thank you for that, President Randall. Because I asked this question of everybody who's on the podcast, and that question is, how do we go about, from your experiences, from the work that you do, the tremendous, the really amazing institutions that you both lead, advice for listeners, viewers, folks in the audience, how do we go about making the kinds of transformative change that we want to see, and how do we go about doing it together? So, President's given us some advice there. More, certainly. President?
Well, if I give an example of running together, when I was at a previous institution, we were in a partnership with a local university, and we decided we were going to fix transfer. We're going to fix these experiences. We brought the school district in, and so we set our first annual summit, and we set a goal of outcomes that we were going to achieve. And then we realized halfway through that it wasn't about the outcomes, it was about the relationships. And so we just let go on the outcomes, spent the time building relationships. 3 years later, so we kept doing this, just bringing people together, building those relationships. 3 years later, organically we were seeing the changes, because at that point it wasn't, oh, well, you can't trust high school teachers. Oh, you can't trust community college faculty. Oh, you can't trust university faculty. Right? They knew each other. And so we could talk about where were the disconnects and what were those experiences for students. So I think some of it is we have to build in space for relationships so that we build that trust that allows us to focus on students.
I would 100% agree with that. I think generally we all know which direction we've got to go, and now it's really 90% executing. And since these are people and not machines, yeah. It's about knowing each other and how to make the handoffs with each other rather than anything else. Sometimes we spend too much time on the strategy and where we're going to go, and we forget that we've got to spend actually more time with each other trying to figure that out. Here's a funny story that comes out of comes out of the business strategy literature. There was World War II, German paratroopers paratrooping or flying into the Pyrenees in a deep snowstorm, and they had one day to get to their objective. And when they got to the ground, they realized everybody that spoke Basque, it was the Basque region, had been killed. So they picked up a map. They couldn't read it. They had to reorganize themselves. They didn't have real leaders. They bound together. They got to know each other. They fought their way through the snowstorm. They made it a little bit late, but they made it to their objective. When they made it to their objective, they were asked how did they do it without any leaders. And they said, oh, we followed this map. And the general looked at the map and said, that's amazing, because that's a map of the Alps. That's a true story. And again, I think it's probably a little exaggerated, but I think you all know the direction we've got to go, right? And really at this point, it's forge the relationships, figure out how to get there, and we can overplan.
Yeah. Thank you both very, very much. Listeners, viewers, this has been Together. Join us again next time.